Hello friends, your local front desk girl here to talk about something that I didn't realize a lot of people aren't familiar with, which is task force at hotels. So what is it? Generally, someone or many someones will be brought in on task force in order to help out during transitional periods, special projects, peak seasons, or anything else that would require temporary staff. And this temporary staffing might be brought in to fill any position in the hotel from housekeeping to upper management. The thing is though, it's pricey for the hotels because whoever they bring in on task force, they need to pay for their travel to get there. They will put them up in one of their rooms. They will pay for their meals during their stay, and they will pay them to work. So it's basically an all expense paid trip to go work at a hotel. But because it is so pricey to bring someone in on task force, usually hotels will try to find a different workaround before they do that. Like they might have an assistant manager take over a manager's responsibilities. They might spread out the workload. They might implement mandatory overtime for all the frontline workers. You get the picture. But that can only last so long, and it usually leads to some more issues down the line. For example, in one of these small boutique hotels I worked at that had a very limited front office staff, we probably could have really benefited from bringing someone in on task force, because here's how the cycle would go. Someone would quit and then we'd be short on staff, so all of the staff would then have to pick up the slack and they would do mandatory overtime. I remember working 6 to 8 days in a row before having a day off, and then that would go on for weeks while they hired, interviewed, oriented, and then trained the person who would take over the role for the person who quit. And then by the time that person was ready, someone on the team would have burnt out and then quit themselves, and then you would just start all over again. And it was just an endless cycle, and we absolutely could have benefited from just bringing on someone temporarily to cover for us being short-staffed, and then maybe that cycle could have been broken. But it's a hard balancing act for the hotel, because the hotel would try to be balancing how much it would cost to have someone come in on task force for the time that we were doing all that interviewing and training and everything. But is that more or less expensive than constantly being in this loop of having to interview and hire and orient and train someone? So at a certain point, it becomes way more expensive to have to go through that process over and over again, but then they have no way of knowing that that pattern is going to happen until it's too late. So, it's a tricky balancing act. Now, how and why did I get tapped to go on task force, and what was my experience like? Well, it was 2020. In the beginning of the year, I had been laid off like a lot of people, and then several months later, I got called back to come and work the overnights. I'd been working overnights for about a month when on one of my nights off, I got a call from my general manager asking if I could go on task force. One of our sister hotels in Savannah, Georgia had a front desk agent who had to go into quarantine for a week, and since I was a single lady with no kids, no pets, and no real problem leaving for a week, I got asked if I would go do task force. And after he explained what task force was, of course I said, yes. And honestly, I loved being on task force. The hotel I got to stay at was part of the Marriott Autograph Collection, so it was absolutely gorgeous. The room itself was beautiful. They had a specialty restaurant on site, and I got to eat there for free. So you know I had breakfast, lunch, and dinner every single day. The hotel itself has actually since been sold and renamed, but at the time that I was there, the owner of that signature collection brand actually lived in Savannah and went to that hotel very often. And one night I was having dinner at the restaurant, and he actually came up to me and asked if I was enjoying my time there. And of course, I'm looking at the owner just like, having a great time. Honestly, I don't know if he knew that I was on task force because I wasn't in uniform when I was eating, or if he just saw some woman eating alone at the restaurant and was like, hey, Hope you're having a good time. So originally I was only supposed to be there for 5 days, but the person I was covering for ended up having to quarantine for another week. So they asked me if I wouldn't mind extending. And of course I said, yes. And since my 5-day stay had turned into 11, they actually gave me 2 days off, and that was still covered by the hotel. I was still able to stay and eat for free. And because I had made friends with everyone at the front desk and concierge, they actually gave me a free tram ticket, so I was able to hop on and hop off and explore Savannah, which I love Savannah, Georgia, and I'm really excited because I'm going back this year for my friend's bachelorette. But back on topic, by extending my stay, I also qualified for a bonus at the company. However many days you did task force, if you did 10, 20, 30, 40, every increment or so, you would get a monetary bonus just for being on task force, on top of being paid your usual rate and then having your meals and hotel and travel covered. So I don't think it's terribly surprising that I was really sad when it was time to leave and go back to my home hotel, because on task force, you're helping them out. It feels like a paid working vacation to you, but to them, you have sacrificed your time to come and help them when they really desperately need that help. And so then I go back to my home hotel, where I then eventually had that cycle of staffing issues. And you can bet that I just wanted to go back to Savannah. Now, if you're thinking, oh my gosh, that sounds amazing, I want to do that too, how do I get in on task force? I have a couple suggestions. First, if you're already working for a hotel, ask your management if your company does task force. Ask if you could be added to a list of people who would be willing to go on task force. There was someone on Reddit who said that he actually works as an independent contractor for a major brand, where his full-time gig is just going on task force and helping to cover for hotels that need the extra help. And then otherwise, I did see that there are task force agencies where I assume that you sign up with them, and then if a hotel needs people to come in on task force, they reach out to the agency, and the agency then asks who would be willing and available to go wherever to help cover on task force. But if you are interested in joining an agency, I would recommend doing your due diligence. I only did a quick Google search, so I can't recommend any agencies necessarily, and always be careful and read over any sort of contract very closely, because I don't know what the agency's cut would be from you going and doing that work. So do your due diligence before you sign up. But if anyone in the comments actually has any experience with these agencies, has their own experiences on task force, has any advice that they want to give, please do. As always, this is a place where I love to have people come in and share their experiences, share their tips, and just help each other out, because the hospitality world is huge and there are always opportunities, and it's just great to come together and help each other out. But with that being said, thank you so much for watching. If you have any suggestions about any other hospitality topics you'd like me to talk about, please, as always, comment them down below. Thank you again for being here. My name is Jessica Vanell. I have a degree in hospitality management. I have worked in hotels for 7+ years, and I know a thing or two because I've seen a thing or two. Have a great day. Bye.